morning. Welcome to the BOOSST training. My name is Jill Weller, and I'm the Training Grant Analyst in the Research Service Corps. And today we're going to be talking about Biosketches, ORCID, other support, and ScieENcv training. We were really disappointed that we weren't able to do this in public, in person, because it's nice to have that personal face-to-face, and we were going to have all the HISPO and OCGA analysts there so people can meet and greet. And so we're a bit disappointed in that, but we still wanted to get the information out to you. So let's get started. Today we're going to go through the background and objectives and kind of that 50,000-foot picture about grants at UCSD, and then we're going to get into the specifics of the NIH Biosketch with Chelsea Van Pelt, and then Brahman Nad, our SIO SME, he will be doing the NSF portion. And then we have Karen Heskett from the library. She's an amazing resource, and she's going to be going over ORCID and ScieENcv, which are some components to the NSF Biosketch and the NIH Biosketch. And then we'll again be going back to NIH other support with Chelsea, since she's our expert from health sciences, and then back to Brahman with NSF current and pending. And then Erica Wilson, the HISPO director, she will be talking about foreign components today. So today, we know there were some new policies over the past year. ORCID is now being required for some trainees for NIH, and then also ScieENcv is going to be one of the preferred methods for filling out a biosketch for NSF. NSF came out with they came out with new requirements, and they're going to be implemented in June, that you have to use one of their NSF approved formats for current pending and the biosketch. So that's why one of the reasons why we want to do the training. And then also last July, NIH released some other support changes. So we'll go over the entire other support for NIH and those changes. And then lastly, we want to promote accuracy and consistency in this entire grants application process. Recently, I was talking to someone from Sponsored Projects Office, and I can't remember who, but they were talking to someone from NIH, and it's really important that there's like a level playing field for all the applicants. If someone is trying to fit, 6 pages of a biosketch into the 5, and it's crammed and things don't look good, or they're kind of bending the rules, it's not fair to the other applicants. So NIH really wants that fairness across the board for all their applicants. And if you think about it, if you're applying for a job and you turn in your CV and there are a bunch of misspelled words, automatically you start forming an opinion. Can this person even do the job? So NIH is starting to look at those biosketches and other support documents closer for more accuracy. And so we want to be consistent as a campus. So again, that was our last objective for today. So the background, I'd like to kind of give you the 50,000-foot picture of grants at UCSD, and we do a pretty big book of business here. We did about $1.3 billion in grant funding in fiscal year 2019, and progressively it's been going up every year. And approximate amount of proposals, we submitted a little over 2,700 in health sciences. Academic affairs, your general campus, submitted about 1,700, and then SIO just a little under 500 at 497. The other, which I'm not exactly sure who other is, but we did 14 of those proposals, and then the total is about 5,000 proposals submitted. Now, we didn't get all 5,000, So you can see here, this is a great website. It's on Blink and it's under the OCGA web page. And you can see here in blue what was proposed. In the blue it says millions, but it's actually billions. So you can see here in FY 2015, we submitted about $4 billion in proposals. In FY19, we did about 4.7 billion and proposed. And then you can see here what was awarded, 1.3 billion was actually awarded. And you can see steadily, we keep going up. So it's very encouraging for the campus. If we break it down by each academic affairs area, kind of like we just saw before, your health sciences is your bigger book of business, and then your academic affairs and your SIO. And it just kind of goes in, if you like statistics and numbers, I think we've all seen a lot of graphs lately with COVID, but some people like this stuff. So I like to put this in here. And then breaking it down by agency, I think this is an important thing to understand. So you can see here, Department of Health and Human Services is a little under 500 million, or 38% of our book of business. And a lot of that DHHS is NIH, and a lot of what we're going to cover today is NIH. And second to that, we're going to be covering NSF, which is about 115 million at 9%. So having this training today, we're covering two of the bigger areas. Some of these other smaller areas, industry, they don't have consistent ways they do biosketches, so it's hard to do training on that. But we thought this training would cover the major two agencies. So I'd like to go ahead and next up we have Chelsea with the NIH Biosketch, and she works with me in the Research Service Corps. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everybody. My name is Chelsea Van Pelt. I am currently a supervisor in the Research Service Corps. I have been with UCSD for over 15 years. I've been working in sponsored projects for the entirety of my career here at UCSD. And I have been a research administrator now for 12 plus years. So lots of experience working with PIs on biosketches, and then eventually we'll cover other support. And so there's lots of experience there too. So let's get into it. So the NIH Biosketch. What is the purpose of a biosketch? So biosketch really enables reviewers to evaluate the highlighted qualifications of the PI and key personnel that will be executing. So they have a specific role on the proposed project. So anytime the PI wants to name somebody on their grant application, they will need to submit a biosketch, and they are considered what we call key personnel. What does the biosketch allow? Well, it allows the applicants to describe the magnitude and significance of their scientific contributions, so including their publications. So it's really a time for them to essentially sell themselves to NIH and why they're qualified to do the project. And it provides detailed information about their research experience in the context of the proposed project. So why are they qualified to execute this project? Who must complete a biosketch? All senior key personnel and other significant contributors that are listed on the grant application. So like I mentioned previously, anytime a PI wants to name somebody on their application, they need to include a biosketch. What do NIH reviewers look at? Well, the first thing they look at is the PI qualified to do the job. Does the personal statement reflect that they have enough experience to execute the project? So this is why Section A of their biosketch is very important and must always be modified by the PI, and they need to essentially explain what makes them qualified to execute this project. Does the PI have a peer-reviewed publications relevant to the proposal? And remember, format and layout always matter. Think of yourself in the reviewer's hands and think of If you were on their side looking at this BioSketch, does it make sense? Is it formatted correctly? Is it in the correct layout? Is everything flow? So always kind of put yourself in their shoes when you're thinking of these things, and when you're reviewing a BioSketch after the PI has sent it to you, or if you're even putting it together and trying to organize everything, always try to check for that because this is very important. And always be consistent. So is the BioSketch consistent with other parts of the application? So that's always very important because we want to make sure that the things that are included in the BioSketch are also the things that are included in the other parts of the application. And this is also, I want to point out here as well, this is why, because NIH reviewers look at the BioSketch and they look for these types of things, this is why it's always important to never recycle the same BioSketch for different proposals, because that statement, that personal statement could be relevant to one project, but maybe not the other. So you always want to check with the PI for each application to make sure that all those, the publications that are included, the personal statement, all of that is relevant to the project in which they're applying for. All right, so what are the main sections of the BioSketch? The header. So in the header, we include the name, the ERA Commons ID, and their position, education, and training. This is where all this information is listed. Section A is the personal statement. Section B is positions and honors. Section C is contributions to science. And Section D is research support and/or scholastic performances. So what does an NIH Biosketch form look like? So here's an example. And as you can see, the things that we always want to check for, is the NIH header okay? Is our BioSketch form relevant, or has it expired? So always make sure that the date is still current. And you can see right there, we have the correct form version because it will expire in 2/28/2023. And then always note the page limit. So 5 pages. This is very important. A lot of times when we go to PDF a document, or when we go to put everything together, it can sometimes exceed that 5-page limit. So you always want to reach out to the PI if you're in this situation and have them condense some information, maybe remove some irrelevant information to condense it down to 5 pages. It's okay if it's under 5 pages, but it cannot exceed 5 pages. Always be sure to include the ERA Commons ID. When you're filling out your application in Assist, this ID is very important because this will pre-populate the PI's information. So having it here as well is always very important. And make sure that education is listed oldest to newest. And when you're filling out the, for fund managers, when you're filling out the senior key personnel profile in Assist, this is a good way too to find out their highest degree earned in the year, and then you can complete those fields also. So in this case, I would list PhD for their degree and 1996 for the year earned in the Assist application. Personal statement, Section A. So this is always the PI's responsibility. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a time for them to really sell themselves. So this makes them stand out to NIH when they're reviewing their application. Why are they qualified to do this research project? So this should always be reviewed and completed by the PI for every application. So customize the personal statement for each grant, like I mentioned, and then the name of the grant proposal and speak to the funding mechanism. And it should be relevant to each application, like I mentioned, and emphasize, why they are in a leadership role to execute this, their expertise in this field, and if they are going to be, if this is a fellowship being submitted and they're going to be a mentor, why do they have experience to be a mentor for this fellow that's applying? and explain any factors affecting productivity. And again, they can use up to 4 publications to highlight their experience. And please note that they cannot exceed 4 publications, so 4 is the max. Next up is section B, and this is their positions and honors. And this is always, again, completed by the PI. List in chronological order and conclude with the most current position. So here you can see that we left the end date open because their current position is, in this case, an associate professor in the Department of Psychology. And always list everything in chronological order going down. And be sure to include any foreign affiliation appointments. So if the faculty member has an appointment at another university or at another foreign institution, this is always very important to list so we can have full disclosure with NIH. So under positions and employment, like I mentioned, if they hold a joint appointment with a foreign entity, that needs to be included in section B under positions and employment. And this includes titled academic, professional, or institutional appointments, whether or not they are receiving salary, and whether or not they are full-time, part-time, voluntary, it doesn't matter. It needs to be listed so we can maintain full disclosure with NIH. Section C, contributions to science. They can list up to 5 contributions, and this would include historical background, central findings, influence of the finding on the progress of science and how it applies, and a specific role in the described work. Description of each contribution should be no longer than a ½ page, including citations. And they can only cite up to 4 publications per each contribution. This is a very common mistake that I see on most faculty's biosketches is generally they will list more than 4. So always be sure to review this and make sure they only have 4. If they exceed their limit, then reach out to them and find out which one that they would want to eliminate. Make sure the PMC ID number is listed. And then this is optional, but they can include a URL to their My Bibliography. Section D, research support. List ongoing research support first, the project name and the title of the grant. List the project and the grant number. And after the PI name, put PI in parentheses. If they are a co-investigator, you would put co-investigator in parentheses. And you would list the project dates, not the budget dates. And then their role underneath would be PDPI, co-investigator, whatever the role is on the project. And then the major goal. This is usually a 1 or 2 sentence description of the project, and this information is always provided by the PI. And be sure to list any foreign support if that's applicable. And then next up is completed research support, and you are going to list any research grants that have ended within the last 3 years. If they ended over 3 years ago, you can remove them from their biosketch. Do not include the number of person months or direct costs in section D of the biosketch. How to read an NIH grant number or application ID. So the application type, the activity code, the institute code, serial number, and support year, and other suffixes help us to determine what kind of funding mechanism we have, which agency is funding us, and then the serial number identifies that specific grant. So the application type, the activity code, institute code, serial number, support year, and the other suffixes. So how do we read an NIH grant number? So the application type tells us what type of application it is. Is it a new, is it a competing continuation, a supplement, an extension, a non-competing continuation, a change of institution, a change of grantee, a change of institute or division, and a change of institute or division for competing and non-competing. So based on the number, this will tell us what those are. The activity code is a 3-digit code identifying a specific category or activity. So in like an example, an R01, T32, R44, just depends on what type of activity this is. The administrating organization code is a 2-letter code identifying the primary NIH institute. So this will tell me what type of agency within NIH that this grant is through. So in the example above, CA would refer to the National Cancer Institute. The serial number is a 6-digit number generally assigned sequentially to a series within an NIH institute or center. So this number is unique to the grant. And then the suffixes is the grant year. The 2-digit number indicates the segment in the budget period of a project. The supplement could also be, if you see a letter S, this could indicate that there's a supplement, so S1, S2. An amendment, the letter A and related number identify each amended application. So A1 would be a resubmission. How do you find Biosketch info? So the PI, like I mentioned, always provides the personal statement and the main contributions to science, publications, education, positions, etc. Research support. So there's a few different options we have here. We can look in financial link. We can go to OPAC. They have an award document lookup where we can pull relevant copies of the NOA. We can also go to NIH Reporter or ERA Commons and pull copies of notices of awards or previously submitted applications. And then NSF has their own award search. So there's a couple different places where we can find this information. NIH Reporter, if you go to NIH Reporter's website, you could type in the PI's last name and their first name and their organization. So here we have the PI's last name, Smith, and then we would type in UCSD. Make sure you have active projects selected. And when you do that, you're going to get to this screen. You always want to click on the most recent grant number that pops up. So in this case, the 05. And then you're going to click on that. And then you're going to have all the information. You're going to go to the Details tab, and you're going to have the information that you need in order to complete that section D. You can see here I have the project number. Here's the title, the PI's name, and then the start and the end date. So I have all the information right here in order to generate section D. The only thing that I would need for each section is the major goals, and like I said, that would be the information you would get from the PI. So how are fellowships different in section D? So fellowships, when fellows are applying for grants, they may not have any research funding. So what they're going to do is we can skip this section, or they can complete scholastic performance. And this is what it would look like. They would list the courses with titles and grades. If these applicants also have research support, they may complete both sections. So what are some key points to remember on NIH Biosketches? Format does matter. Like I said before, think of yourself as a reviewer, and what would you look for? Anything that's clearly organized, well written, and formatted correctly is always going to be more favorable. Always make sure you have the correct form. So always look at the header and the form versions and make sure you're using an up-to-date form. The amount of publications, like I mentioned before, this is a common mistake that I see a lot where they have more publications listed. So make sure that they're using the amount that they are limited to. Expired research support dates. Make sure you're reviewing Section D, and if you see anything that's expired on there, check with the PI. Maybe it went into a no-cost extension. If so, we need to adjust the dates, or if it's truly ended, then we need to remove that grant listed there and move it to the completed section. Refer to your checklist and guide for a refresher. So always look at the instructions on NIH's website and make sure that you are using the most up-to-date form and instructions because these things change. So always make sure that you have the correct instructions and make sure that nothing's changed since you last completed the BioSketch last time.
Hi, and welcome to the NSF Biosketch section of this training. My name is Brahman Nad. I'm currently a grant specialist. I manage pre- and post-award funding down at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UCSD. Prior to this, I worked post-award in a central office capacity at San Diego State University Research Foundation. And prior to that, I worked in a pre-award central office position at Sanford Burnham. So to get started, NSF Biosketches are required for senior key personnel on NSF submissions. They're comprised of 5 main sections. We have the professional preparation, which is the senior key members' education. We have their professional appointments, which is their career track. Products or publications, other significant products, and the synergistic activities, all of which can show and demonstrate productivity and background and significance that they can bring in completing the scope of work of the award, something that NSF reviewers are looking at the biosketch to ascertain. So the NSF Biosketch Guidelines, they are limited to 2 pages. That's not changing. They are required for anybody considered senior personnel. An example is somebody who's not a senior key personnel. That might be a programmer or a postdoctoral scholar. Sometimes faculty members might ask you to include a postdoctoral fellow scholar researcher. Keep in mind that NSF limits appointments based on their 2/9 rule. UCSD requires us to appoint postdocs for a year. So if we were to apply for funding, they were to receive it, there would be a difference there that would need to be covered by some other mechanism, typically discretionary accounts, which as you probably are aware, most faculty don't like to utilize. So the way around that would be to propose, the full year, write that up in the budget justification, which is an extra step for the faculty member, but something to consider. No personal information is allowed in the 2 pages. Usually you don't see this too often, maybe with foreign collaborators, but no phone numbers, no home addresses, things like that. This last tab here, must use NSF approved format. Well, as of recording this PowerPoint presentation, NSF released their new PAP, the 20-1, so we'll cover those changes here in just a second, and then we'll get into ScieENcv in a future slide as well. Taking a look at the NSF biographical sketch, a couple of the key pieces that we need to make sure we have, obviously the investigator, their current position, And in section A, the professional preparation, which is essentially their education. We list institution, we list location, we list major or area of study, their degree, and then the list starts with the oldest year of education achieved, right? So Harvard University, Bachelor in Science, 2004 is listed first. Princeton University, the DSc here in biology is listed 2010, that's second. So in order, undergraduate, graduate, postdoc. And then in section B, we have our appointments, and we're gonna list those starting with the current career track position. In our example here in 2014, Dr. Smith started as associate professor at UC Davis. To the right of the dash is blank, indicating a current position. And under that are the listings of the previous career tracks in reverse chronological order. So it's a little bit opposite of how we did professional preparation, but just keep that in mind. The next section, section C, products, used to be called publications, and it can still be comprised of publications up to 5, but it doesn't have to be all publications anymore. As times have evolved, NSF has evolved their definitions with it. Some other examples we can include here are things closely related to the project, such as data sets, software, and things like that. Especially useful for junior faculty who maybe don't have 5 publications that are closely related to the project. It does help show the depth and the breadth of their background and the work that they're working on. Other significant products is a section we're allowed to list up to 5 other items that are not exactly related to the proposed project. So publications in various fields that aren't specific to completing the scope of work of this award, but that do give the NSF reviewers an understanding of the productivity, the activity that this faculty member is involved with, and helps again demonstrate their ability to complete the scope of work proposed on this proposal. Next up is synergistic activities. So up to 5 examples of things that have broader impact in the individual's career are able to be listed here, no more than 5. And in this specific example here in section D, we're listing membership in a committee. We're listing effort as an organizer, as a co-organizer actually of a biology workshop. And thirdly, service as an NIH peer reviewer. So this is sort of the big news. I'm happy to go over this with everybody. So new federal requirements, right? Starting June 1st, NSF has given us 2 options, 2 NSF approved options for the biographical sketch. One is going to be ScieENcv, which is available now. ScieENcv, this is a partnership with NIH, and it I believe stands for Science Experts Network Curriculum Vitae. So this will be an NSF approved system where we'll access the system, we'll log in, we'll create a document, we'll fill everything out, we'll create this document. We'll be able to then download and save a compliant PDF version of the biographical sketch for use as part of the proposal submission process to be uploaded in Fastlane, research.gov, or grants.gov. That's one option, one of the 2 available options. The second available option will be an NSF fillable PDF, which is also available now. Proposals will be able to download the PDF, complete it, and then upload it, and this will go in as part of the proposal through Fastlane, research.gov, or grants.gov. According to what we know at this point, these will be the only 2 acceptable formats. So in the FAQs, people had asked if they could create a Word document, convert it to a PDF, upload it, submit, and the response from the NSF was no, that wouldn't pass validation. So please try to adhere to either using ScieENcv or the NSF fillable PDF. Okay, so we just talked about this. To the right, there's an example of what that fillable PDF would look like. You can tell with the blue shaded fields. You're going to go in and key in the information. All right, cool. This brings us to our segue to ORCID ID and ScieENcv. I hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to answering any of your questions. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Well, good morning. I have Karen Heskett, our UCSD librarian, up next. She's going to be going over ORCID and ScieENcv. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much. And hello to everyone, virtually, I guess, at this point in time. So following up, if you went through the section with Brahman, he mentioned the ScieENcv tool, and it's one of the things that can help with the Biosketch, allowing you to set up the basics and then copy and use that as needed. But before we get there, I want to walk you through a tool that can make filling out the Biosketch a little bit easier, and ways to make sure that you always have the right form. And that tool is ORCID, and as well looking at the ScieENcv Biosketch. So there are some policies that are now in place that everyone needs to pay attention to. So the National Science Foundation, their policy starts in June of this year, and that policy is to require the use of ScieENcv to create and submit your Biosketch for NSF grants. ORCID, they are saying is optional, but they highly recommend that because you can pull in the information that you need from different platforms. So NIH has had a policy for a couple of years now, and that is that there are certain people who are required to have an ORCID. People who are on training grants, who are getting fellowships, and those who are under career development awards. Now the PIs are not required to have the ORCID, but it is strongly encouraged. And I imagine that this policy will probably expand over time. So might as well jump on now, hopefully. And what ORCID does is to help disambiguate, sorry, big word, but just to distinguish one author from another, especially if they have similar names or a common name. And so the NIH policy, this started in January of this year, and the trainees must have that ORCID ID in order to pass the NIH validation requirements. So that's where that number has to be entered, and it has to be tied to the ERA Commons account. And so we'll take a look at that in just a little bit. So what is ORCID? What are we really talking about? And this is simply, ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID. It's an interesting platform. It is independent, it's nonprofit, so there's no fee for signing up. It has some great integrations for automatically populating the information. So if you've heard about Google Scholar, it does something a little bit similar to that. It takes feeds from a lot of different places if you want to set them up. And it is completely customizable, which is a nice option to put information there that some is viewable to the general public, some is viewable only to the researcher, or it's sort of in an in-between ground where what they call, ORCID calls trusted organizations, they can view the information even if it's not publicly available. And so some of the things that ORCID does to pull things through to the ScieENcv, it'll connect an individual's professional information, which could include their education, their current position, where they're currently working, their background interests, activities, and grants. So ERA Commons is a place where a lot of grant information happens, but if you don't happen to have an ERA Commons account, and the information is not in an NSF profile, ORCID can be a place where you can put in that information and then reuse it as necessary. And then it's also a place to put a person's publications. And these could be journal articles, they could be poster presentations, conference activities. A lot of different things are there. And as I said, it's fully customizable so that this information can be pulled through to other platforms. We're also hoping for greater integration in the near future. So why ORCID? Well, it is used by more than 7,000 journals, and sometimes it is actually required by the journal. ORCID is integrated into many different systems, the publishers, the funders, and we hope in the very near future that it will work with university systems. So think promotion and tenure packages. What if the information that you're already building for funding information can now be easily pulled into a person's CV for their publication and tenure process? It does automate the adding of publications, but there's also the option to manually enter that. And it is used by NIH, now NSF, to hopefully populate those platforms as well. So great, I've got you convinced. You want to go and sign up right now, right? Or try to get all your trainees to do that. There are a couple of ways to sign up. So one is right from the ERA Commons platform. If you go to your personal profile, you'll see the create or connect your ORCID ID, so you can start the process here. If ERA Commons is not where you're starting, you can simply go to ORCID directly. And so one tip that I've had to retrain my brain is to drop the H on this stupid thing. I kept trying to type the flower and it didn't get me where I wanted to go. So just remember ORCID, ORCID.org. And oftentimes, if the person you're working with is not sure whether they have an ORCID ID or not, this is the place I would encourage you to start, because it gives you a place to search to see if there is an account with somebody's name. And what I see sometimes is, unfortunately, there are a lot of names with no information. So a number and a name, and you don't know if it's you or somebody else. So even if they are not going to use the ORCID fully as a CV, as a place that they want to put information, encourage them to put at least where they are working. But very easy to sign up. Once you have that ORCID ID, if you started at ORCID itself, you do need to go back to your ERA Commons profile to connect your ORCID to ERA Commons. So they want to see that there on your profile. When you are starting to make that connection, so from ERA Commons, a box will pop up and it's basically trying to go out and connect the two systems together. And this is the box where you authorize that or deny it. Hopefully at this point you're ready to authorize that, and it will automatically put in that ORCID ID now in that profile. So you won't see the create or connect. That ORCID ID is going to be right there. And so again, this is in ERA Commons. So you've had success. Yay! All right, so let's go out and look at ORCID now. So let me, which one? Oh, we'll do this one. All right, so let's go to ORCID. So I've been there before, so it auto-populates for me. And let's just see if anyone is here. So let's see if Jill has an account. Yes, there she is. Great. So you can double check and make sure. So there's not a whole lot of information here. Let me do one other person just to give you a sense of what a really fleshed out profile might be. And let's look at Marianne Martone's profile. There she is. And so you get a little bit of her biography. So she's actually using this as an online platform to let people know what she's interested in. And so you see some of the websites that she is involved with, put in some keywords, has her email, and that's something that we'll talk about a little bit as to which one to use. Here's her employment, education, funding. Now this is one section that I think can be very, very helpful because it can pull into the ScieENcv information. My goodness, she's been busy. And then all the publications. And you see here preferred source, and that is coming from something called Crossref. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a little bit. Here's one where she entered it all by herself, so manual enter. She connected with a platform called Faculty of 1000 and pulled in some information, so you get an idea of where this is coming from. So she even is connected to Europe PMC. All right, so let's get practical and show you sign in. You saw a screenshot of it earlier. And this is the sign in information. Very simple. They put in whatever details they need to. So first name, last name, the primary email. This could be their work email. They could do what we encourage, or my scholarly communications librarian colleague encourages, is use a personal email and add an additional email of their work email. And that's simply because if your trainees move on to a different institution, their email address may change and they may lose their @UCSD email. It's very hard to reset the password at that point in time because they no longer have access to that email. So the primary email should be their personal email that's not going to change over time. Create a password. And so by default, you can set these settings. So everyone can see everything. Trusted parties is your mid-ground so that those things that you have connected to can see the information, but not everyone can. Or do you want to leave it only private so that it's only me? Each item in ORCID can have this setting adjusted. So they can choose which one they want to do. And then you just prove that you're a human, not a robot, finish up with these clicks, and there's your registration. So let me go back and sign in. So I have not changed my email to my personal one. I still am using my UCSD one. Planning to stay here for a while, but I think eventually I will change that. Looks like the internet's a little bit slow today, but that's okay. So again, not quite as filled out as Marianne Martone's is. You do have all of these options, which, like, we didn't see country on hers, also known as on hers. That's because with nothing there, there's nothing to see, so they just skip it. I have some education information, some memberships. I put in this test. We're gonna play with this in a little bit. And then some of my works. And you can see here the little green icons, and that says everyone can see it. And then I have a couple of different things, some things from Crossref, some things from Scopus, some things that I typed in. This researcher ID is something that comes from Web of Science. And you can take a look at some of these. And so you can see here, some of these have 2 options, some of these have 3. So let me click on number 3. And you can see here different ones. So one comes from a platform I'm using called Science Open. One comes from Web of Science. And actually, I typed this one in as well. And you can make any one of these your preferred one. So if I change it to this one, it has, I think I like the Science Open one. It had a little bit, oh, it had the PMID number, and Web of Science didn't have that. So that's just an ORCID profile, very simple. You can print this out and it prints out like a CV, so that could be very, very helpful for some of your trainees to not have to redo that information. All right, so that's ORCID. Let me come back to my slides. I think I have a couple of more here. And so let me say, if you have questions about ORCID, please don't hesitate to contact me. I haven't talked to Jill about where we'll put my email address, but we'll either have it on the website or you can find me at the library. So don't hesitate to ask any ORCID questions that you might have. So a couple of reminders. We've already talked about these, but I did want to kind of cover them one more time. Check to see if an account already exists. And even if that trainee won't use it completely for a CV, for an online platform, enter some of the basic information like their current employment so that they can find themselves again without wondering who this is and who it isn't. If somebody thinks they might have 2 ORCID IDs, I'm not going to tell you how to fix it. I'm going to tell you contact the library and we'll help them figure out how to combine those 2 accounts. ORCID has a way to do that. I think they figured out that they get maybe a few too many of those questions. So I do want to go over these 3 questions. I know I talked about it, which email to use, so we'll just quickly reiterate that. What trusted organizations to include, and isn't a Google Scholar profile enough? So which one to use? As I said earlier, personal account. Those institutional emails may change over time, and if your researchers might be moving around, it's good to have that personal account so they can reset the password. So trusted organizations. This is where the magic kind of happens. So ScieENcv talks to ORCID. ORCID can pull in information from, say, a program called Scopus. So a couple of the key ones that I can think of are some of the searching tools. BASE is one. We saw that Crossref mentioned. This is a great place that just collects a variety of different tools if they have a DOI. There's a tool called Dimensions, which is really helpful, but in ORCID speak, it's called Dimensions Wizard. Europe PMC, which is very similar to the US PMC. And as I mentioned, Scopus. Now, we don't have that database, but they have author profiles there. And this could be a large corpus of articles that can be pulled in automatically. It's a great tool. And if you have questions about that, do let me know. It's really easy to work with. Funding tools. Sometimes it's easier to pull in this information. So Dimensions Wizard keeps track of this information, most of it anyways, and can pull in, and you can auto-populate that. And of course, we'll talk about connecting ERA Commons and connecting with the NSF. All right, so Google Scholar. Isn't a Google Scholar profile enough? And the answer to that is no. It is a great place for people to have an online platform. In fact, they may like the time cited and the H-index, and that might be very helpful for them. So if you're not familiar with those terms, don't worry about it. It's kind of another discussion, but most authors will be familiar with that. The problem with Google Scholar is everything is publicly viewable and it is not customizable, and it does not interact with other systems. You can't connect up any of our university systems to the Google Scholar profile. You can't connect it to ScieENcv. It's just sort of out there and everything is publicly viewable, but you don't have that bibliography place. Remember Marianne Martone's ORCID account? It had that nice bibliography section to it. Google Scholar doesn't offer that. So some questions you might have as an administrator: should you get an ORCID 2? And the answer that I think is yes, because it gives you the ability to become a trusted partner for somebody's ORCID, which is sort of their word for delegate. And that way you can work with somebody's ORCID ID, help them with it without having to know their sign-in information. I know for some people that can be a problem, and some of them are like, no, go ahead, sign into my profile, no problem. And so I sometimes get a question of examples of an ORCID profile, and can you point someone to what that online would look like, which is why I did Marianne Mortone's, but we have a few other ones that might be very helpful. And so there's an online guide that you can use to connect with some of the people that we know who have ORCIDs. And you can, they're from a variety of different disciplines, so you can point people to that so they can get a sense of what can ORCID look like, what kind of information should I have there. So ScieENcv, why should I connect that to ERA Commons? Well, it autofills some great details, your name, your education, and you'll be able to select research support from the ERA Commons list of grants, which is great. Why should you connect ScieENcv with ORCID? Well, it will help you fill in the section, the A section with the personal statement. You can get a list of publications that are outside of PubMed. So if you've done this before, you know that if you have a My Bibliography, you can pull that information in. But what if you don't bother with my NCBI, My Bibliography? Maybe that's not where you have to worry about things. So your national NSF folks, they may want something different, and so ORCID can be that something different. And you can get funding information outside of ERA Commons. Again, our NSF folks might find that very helpful. So we've mentioned ScieENcv. So what really is it? And as you can see there on the screen, Science Experts Network Curriculum Vitae. And it's just a place to basically do the biosketch, to create something unique, and you can have as many profiles as you need. So you can see here the different organizations that are accepting biosketches. It keeps track of which version of the biosketch to use, so you don't have to wonder, am I on the right one or not? Because I know that can affect the grant application process. All right, so what does it offer? As we said, a lot of different options for filling that out. It could be NSF proposals, applications, the NIH fellowships, and the integration between both NCBI's My Bibliography and the ORCID, as well as connecting with ERA Commons. All right. A couple of other things that it does in addition to auto-populating content, and this is editable content. So if you need to add some unique information, you can. It does keep track of your page limit, so it can help you keep on track with that. Because it is reusable information, it's a rather convenient place for different projects. And as I mentioned, always make sure that you're using the up-to-date and correct biosketch. So where do you begin with this? And so the URL is just down there at the bottom, and you've got that big old button to start. If you are a PubMed user, you'll notice that you can log into NCBI itself. So if you prefer PubMed, you can do that, but PubMed's got that sign in to NCBI up here in the top corner. So you might have some different things that you need to pay attention to as you log in. So we're going to go look at ScieENcv, and I'll mention some slides that I'm not going to show you, which are some screenshots of different things. So if you need to come back and look at just the images that are there, the slides will have that information. So let's do this. Let me sign out of this. So we'll start with a really complex account. And we'll start with Dr. Stephanie Strafty, so that we can show you kind of what all of the wonderful things happen. And so let's just see, can I get to ScieENcv just by Googling it? There it is. And here's our big Get Start button. Oops. Let me sign out my other person. I'll try that one more time. All right. So we're going to start by signing in with her ERA Commons account. All right. So, oops, that wasn't the right one. Oh, good. I've got her login information there, and let me get her password. Cross my fingers, hope it goes in. All right. Why did it not work?
Hey, Karen, sorry to interrupt you, but sometimes when this happens, I notice with the NIH website, like you have to close out your browser, or see how it says at the top, it says it doesn't have the HTTPS.
Okay.
And if you go out like to Google, you know what I mean? And I know it's weird, but
Yeah, let's try it this way. I did check this out this morning just to make sure that it would work.
So this is a side note for presenters. I do that as well, but then I notice if you have the website open, it blanks out or whatever, and then you get that thing.
Oh.
Anyway, let's cross our fingers.
Yeah, if I was already signed in, I think it would have just logged me in. All right. Well, nope, it's going to be a pill. All right, so let me. Okay.
Well, I guess we'll have a plan B, Karen. Doesn't matter whether you're live or recording, it still doesn't want to work for you. Good old ERA Commons.
Yeah, some things get a little cranky. All right, so I can't show you a really big account, but at least I do have, I can show you the connection to ORCID. And so if you're signing in by ORCID, you don't see it here in the list. So it's like, where is it? So just go in to sign in with another party or third party. And there's my ORCID. So I'm going to log in with that. And I'll think. Yay, it logged me in. Okay, so let's come down here. So you'll notice that I am here at my NCBI account. So I got a lot of junk. Don't worry about that stuff. We'll just come all the way down to the bottom and manage ScieENcv. I have a little bit of a profile here, but this is completely editable. So if I wanted to add more information, I could certainly do that. And it's recognizing that my ORCID is connected here, which is great. Let's create a new document. And so we'll put testing ORCID. Let's pull up the fellowship Biosketch. I don't want to go from an existing document. I could, because I had those two that were on my list before, so that's how I can reuse the information. I can start with a blank document, and if you start that and realize later, oh, I should have connected it to ORCID, you can connect later if you need to. I'm just going to do that automatically. And so what we were going to show you before was you could pick this first option, ERA Commons, and I'm going to connect with ORCID. I'm going to leave this one private, but you could make it public, meaning that there's a URL that you could send to people if you needed to. So we'll go ahead and create that. And so here's the name of my Biosketch. Here's my name in my ORCID. If I had an ERA Commons account, I would get that information here. It automatically pulled in my education, so that's great. The ERA Commons does the same thing. The personal statement is here, so when you're ready to edit that statement, so you want to put in some information here, blah, 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 whatever you need to say about your research and the reason why you're doing this. And then this is a place where you can have up to 4 publications. And so I have some things here that I could pick from my bibliography. And I could also pull from ORCID, either or. So I'll select my 4 things and click Save Citations. And there they are. Oops, let's get this right. I'll just stick something in there. So we have something. It pulled in my position, my current employment. I could add another entry if I needed to. It didn't pull in my professional memberships, so I'd have to type those in. It was on my ORCID profile, but they didn't pull it in. They also didn't pull in, well, I didn't have any honors to pull in. But I think some of this information comes in a little bit better with ERA Commons. Your contribution to science. So again, this is a place where you can select citations, whether it's from ORCID or from my bibliography. I kind of went through that quickly. There are some other options here, I thought we could select some different ones. Oh, there it is. It's under my bibliography. I can add some additional citations if I needed to. So if it's not in ORCID or in my bibliography, you can do that. You might want to think about this option. If you do have a My Bibliography, you can include this, which is a full list of all of the publicly available items in my bibliography. And this last one is where you get your funding information. And I can add in an award. And so I made a fake one that I'll be able to pull in from ORCID. And so I've got that, and we'll say done. And since I picked the fellowship one, you get a little bit more information here about school and grades, which I know can be important in some of those fellowship biosketches. So if this is completely filled out, you're ready to grab it as a PDF. Oh, I'll go ahead and open that. Oops. And let me pull this over here. There we go. So then you get the version up there at the top, and you get all of this information filled out. So that can certainly be a big help in creating that biosketch and then being able to reuse it. All right. You can do the same thing with other tools or with the NSF. Let's see, did I have? I think I had it. We can, do you think it's worth going through the NSF process? We do have someone that we can sign in as, but he doesn't have much in his account. So it's just kind of showing the same things over again.
I don't have anybody else.
Okay. All right. So that is what we wanted to show you with the ScieENcv and connecting it to ORCID and what it can do for you. And then I think just as a summation of things, ScieENcv has just this nice little graphic. You can link it to my bibliography. You can link it to ORCID. You can have multiple biosketches. It's shareable, it's downloadable, and it just gives you that head start that you might be looking for. All right, I think that's it. Or, oh, it's quiz time. Jill has a quiz for you all.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate it. And I will put your contact information definitely on the website so people can get a hold of you. And I really appreciate the knowledge that the library shares with us.
Happy to do it, and good luck on the other parts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye. So next up, we're going to do a little biosketch quiz for you and see how much you've been paying attention. So if you could find the 2 errors in the header part of the biosketch. Give you a couple seconds. So the first one, a lot of people are going to be messed up with this for a little while because they just changed the forms. The old forms just expired 3/31/2020, and the new forms just came out. So always make sure they're on the newest form. And then the second one is it's missing the ERA Commons username. These are very common mistakes that we see very often. So find the error in the personal statement. Pretty easy one. There's too many publications listed, so that 5th one will have to go. Find 3 errors in positions and honors. So there's 2 in here that are pretty obvious. 1 is not so obvious. The first one is this particular assistant professor at Washington University is not in chronological order. So that could easily have been missed, but that one should have been moved up. And then the second one is pretty obvious. The format is very sloppy, so that needs to be cleaned up. And then the third one, Kendara 10 font is not an approved size by an NIH, so that would need to be corrected. Find 2 errors in the contributions to science. Again, there's only 4 publications allowed, so these last 2 will have to be taken off. And then the URL is not a .gov link. So that is not acceptable by NIH standards. Find 3 errors in the research support. Remember, this is a biosketch, not other support. So the first one is there should be no effort amounts listed on the biosketch, and that's a common mistake we see. And the second one is there should be no pending on the biosketch, absolutely no pending. And then the third one is we see a lot of outdated grants that are older than 3 years that show up on the recently completed research support. So 2013, that one needs to go. So again, on the website, on the Blink site, we have all of these checklists. We have an NIH Biosketch checklist, NSF, and we also have a quick guide. So if you want your own copies of these. But just to go over this again, and as you can see, you can use your checklist as a quick guide. This is the most #1 problem that we see in the SPO offices, is that it's on the incorrect form. The second one being is PIs try to add too many publications. And then the third one is that when you have a grant that say recently ended, it needs to be moved over to completed, and because it's expired, it's no longer a current grant. So that's the other most popular error. So some last key points and reminders that format does matter. It's really important to have that consistency in your application. Always make sure you have the correct form and header version. Check the amount of publications. Always check your research support to see if anything needs to go from completed to or completed needs to come off, it's expired, it's past 3 years, or if you have something that was just recently ongoing, it just ended, it needs to be moved to recently completed. And then again, your checklist will be on the website and your quick guide. Well, let's go back to Chelsea Van Pelt. She's going to go through the NIH other support. She is our subject matter expert from health sciences. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you, Jill. Today we are going to touch on NIH other support. So what is the definition of NIH other support? Sometimes other support is referred to as current and pending support, or active and pending support. So you'll hear kind of a couple terms for it. And the information on other and pending support may be requested at just in time, or it will be collected for the progress reports, or PPRs. This is for NIH to ensure that there is no scientific, budgetary, or commitment overlap. So active and pending support is research funding that is either active or pending, which means when it's pending, it means it's pending a review or an award on which key person shows effort. Now, keep in mind your PI is going to be the best one to determine what his or her actual pending support is. So always review the pending support with your PI to ensure that the grant is still pending, that it is pending either a score or maybe a notice of award is coming in. So all resources made available to a researcher in support of and/or related to all their research endeavors, regardless of whether or not they have monetary value. So maybe your PI has effort on a project, but there's no salary derived from there, that would still need to be listed. And regardless of whether they are based at the institution, the researcher identifies for the current grant. So if the PI has a joint appointment with another institution, they still need to list all those sources in research funding. So all financial resources, whether federal, non-federal, commercial, or institutional that are available in direct support of an individual's research endeavors, including but not limited to research grants and contracts, cooperative agreements, institutional awards, and keep in mind that other support does not include gifts, prizes, donors, equipment grants, training grants, discretionary funds, or domestic LSAs. And pay close attention to the domestic LSAs, and we will touch on that further, but anything foreign would need to be listed because it's foreign, but we do not need to include domestic LSAs. So what is NIH wanting to do here? So NIH reviews other support to ensure that there is no overlap of scientific goals, no overlap of financial support, and no overcommitment of person months for key personnel. Keep in mind that your PI or any other senior key personnel listed on a project cannot exceed 12 calendar months. Always double check and add up all of their calendar months under active to ensure that this does not exceed 12. If it exceeds 12, please work with them accordingly to reduce. NIH other support can be requested and or submitted at just in time, which would be for a competing application, standard notice if the impact score is 30 or less, regardless if it will get funded or not. Now keep in mind, a PI will receive an automated email once their application has passed peer review. This notice does not invite them to submit a formal just-in-time. Wait till they've had the formal request from their GMS in order to submit this. So a lot of times PIs get confused, but just a little tip there. Wait till they've had the formal request from their GMS. And also at the RPPR phase. So these would be for non-competing applications. Changes in active other support occurs during the progress report period. So if you're working on your progress report and you notice that there have been no changes since the last reporting period, then you would not need to update their other support and you would indicate that there have been no changes. If there are changes since, maybe a grant has been awarded since then or a grant has ended since then you want to report those changes and note those things. And always review your previous year's other support to compare the two. So if you did it just in time and now you're working on your year one progress report, you would review the other support submitted at just in time. If you're in years, like 2, 3, 4, or 5, and you're doing your progress report, always review the prior year RPPR other support to determine if a change was made since the last time. So instructions and templates for both can be found on NIH's website. So keep in mind that the just-in-time is for, the other support format page for new and renewal applications is submitted for just-in-time. And then for progress reports, that's the RPPR. And they have blank templates and also instructions there. Okay, so let's review other support at the just-in-time phase. So other support sections for just-in-time include active, so research project awarded and not expired, pending, research project submitted but not awarded or rejected, and again, always confirm with the PI on what's truly pending. And overlap. Are there any scientific goals, financial support, and/or effort commitment that would duplicate proposal under review? Explanation is required. Your PI will be able to indicate whether there are any scientific goals. Any financial or effort commitment would be made by the fund manager, and to determine whether there is commitment overlap. We see this a lot. If a pending application is going to be funded, say the PI is committed at 2 calendar months, but they're currently already maxed out at their effort, we would need to review their effort to determine where they can reduce accordingly to fit into that 12 calendar months with the pending grant should it be funded. If there is no overlap, scientific, financial, or any effort commitment, then you would simply put none. So here is an example of NIH other support. Always include active first. And then we are going to break it out by domestic and foreign. So we're going to list all the domestic grants first. And you want to include the full grant number with the current year. The PI is in parentheses. Now keep in mind, if it's a multi-PI grant, then you would list all the last names in parentheses. The source of support. The title of the project or grant. And you're going to list the entire project period, not the budget year. The person month. The major goals. And the major goals is information that only the PI can provide. What is their role on the project? Are they the PD, PI? Are they a co-investigator, etc.? So always put their role, whatever it was indicated at the time of submission. You're going to list the current total cost. And you're going to list the entire period total cost. Keep in mind, this is a new change since July of 2019. So both of these items are now required. Foreign support on other support. If a PI has any grants that are with a foreign entity, they need to be listed and broken out under foreign active support. So they would not be listed under domestic, they would be listed under foreign. And foreign components will be covered further in the slides by Erica Wilson. But report all current projects and activities, even if their support received is only in kind, office laboratory space, equipment, supplies, or employees. And remember here, it's always better to over-report than to under-report. NIH requires full transparency and full disclosure when it comes to any funding sources that PI must or may have when it's regarding foreign support. And all research resources, including but not limited to foreign financial support, research or laboratory personnel, lab space, any scientific materials, selection to a foreign talent or similar type program, or other foreign or domestic support must be reported. Like I said, it's always better to over-report here than to under-report. Pending and overlap. So we're going to list pending under active grants, so that's going to be the next section down. And do not include the application being considered. Also, do not include UCSD startup packages. And then list if there's any overlap. So again, scientific, budget, or effort. If there is no overlap, simply state none. Do not include gifts, prizes, donors, equipment grants, training grants, or discretionary funds, or domestic LSAs like we discussed in the previous slide. Okay, so progress report, RPPR, other support. So what are the differences? So on an RPPR, we do not list pending. And we also list the award we are working on. When we do just-in-time other support, we do not list inactive, and we do not list the award you are working on. So while they're similar, they're also very different. An RPPR is active and inactive, and just-in-time is current and pending. So RPPR progress report, let's note the differences. So the format is the same as the just-in-time with these added annotations. New. So what has come in since the last progress report was submitted? This award. Include the award for which the progress report is being submitted and include the effort that will be devoted in the next reporting period. Foreign support on other support. Again, you're going to break it out between domestic and foreign and report all current projects and activities, even if the support received is only in kind. Again, this will be covered further down the slides by Erica Wilson. And again, these are all the research resources that need to be included. And again, if you do not have, if the PI does not have any foreign support, you can simply just list none. So on an RPPR, like I said, we do not list pending, we only list inactive grants. So this would be inactive since the last reporting period. So you always want to review either the prior other support that was submitted at just in time if you're working on the year 1 progress report, or the previous year progress report to indicate what has expired since the last reporting period. You would simply just cut and paste that into inactive and note that it was inactivated with the dates and the information. And also you want to note any applicable overlap. Is there any scientific budget or effort? And again, if none, state so. And like I mentioned, this would be inactive since the last RPPR was submitted. So what are the do's and don'ts of other support? Do list other agreements, resources, and significant collaborations. Do not include gifts, prizes, donors, equipment grants, training grants, or discretionary funds. And under a consortium or contractual arrangement, or that is part of a multi-project award, do make sure that you indicate the project number, the PDPI, and the source for the overall project, and provide all information for the sub-project only. So for instance, if my PI has a grant with, say, another university, I would list the source as the university's name / the prime institution. So for example, University of Cincinnati / NIH NINDS could be the prime. So always, and then I would only indicate what my PI's portion of their direct and total cost dollars are. So make sure you pay close attention when you have a sub-project or multi-project. Another example could be a PI is a lead on a core, on a P30. We would only indicate that portion of the core for the PI. We would not list the entire grant funding, only the funding that is going to the PI. All right, so let's get into overlap next. So like I mentioned, there are 3 types of overlap. The first type is scientific. Scientific is the definition of scientific overlap is substantially the same research is proposed in more than one application or is submitted to 2 or more different funding sources for review and funding consideration. Or a specific research objective and the research design for accomplishing that objective are the same or closely related in 2 or more applications or awards, regardless of the funding source. Like I mentioned before, scientific overlap always needs to be confirmed by the PI, and he or she needs to justify that scientific overlap. Budgetary and commitment overlap. budgetary overlap is duplicate or equivalent budgetary items. So for example, equipment, salary are requested in an application, but are already provided for by another source. And then commitment overlap. This is probably the most common type of overlap that I see. And this is when key or senior personnel time commitment exceeds 100% or equivalent to 12 person months. And whether or not salary support is requested in the application, you still need to track their effort on a project. So this is the one that again, like I mentioned, I see the most. So always make sure that you are managing your PI's effort so they do not overcommit themselves. And like I mentioned, we need to explain the overlap. So potential scientific, budgetary, and/or commitment overlap when submitting other support. And we need to also explain the resolution. So how are we going to solve the overlap? So address at the time of award in conjunction with the applicant institution officials, the PDPI, and awarding agency staff. So we're going to explain the overlap and then also the resolution of the overlap. So an overlap sample, the PI should always address any scientific overlap. And here's an example of an overlap statement for commitment. So basically, you're going to state that the PI is overcommitted between an application from their current support and then the application under consideration. And then we always state if the application under consideration is funded with Dr. So-and-so committed at, say, 2 calendar months, how will they reduce their other support accordingly? So this will either require reducing by the 25% rule, or maybe a grant is going to end by the time this grant gets funded, or possibly you will have to go to the GMS and go to NIH or any of the other awarding agencies and reduce, make a formal reduction of effort request. So some notes on other support. Generally, you do not include the just-in-time grant to be listed in the pending section. However, we are starting to see that some GMSs are now requesting it. So I will, you can use your own discretion here, but at the time we would ask you to leave it off unless the GMS asks otherwise. And for individuals with no active or pending support, indicate none. So always have all the sections of the other support listed, and if there is nothing there to list, just simply state none. So what are some frequently asked questions for NIH other support? So question, do I have to submit other support for all key personnel on an RPPR? Answer, only if there is a change in active support and indicate the change. So I always recommend you request this or have the PI verify that there have been no changes since the last reporting period. So question, what should be noted for person months on an RPPR? Always list the anticipated person months in the next budget period. Question, is other support submitted at the time of a competing, so a new or a renewal application? Answer, only if the RFA specifically calls for it. Otherwise, no. We do not submit other support in an NIH application. This is only usually included for mentors on any fellowship or career applications. So what are the other support modifications as of July 2019? So one of the changes is NIH now requests the total award amount for current year. So previously, we always just included the direct cost for the current budget year. Now we need to include both the total award amount, direct and indirect, for the entire project, and total award amount for the entire budget year. Also, listing foreign affiliations. This is a huge requirement now from NIH, as we need to have full disclosure with NIH, and they want any foreign support that a PI has available listed to them. All right, you ready for a quiz? Let's take an NIH Other Support quiz. Can you find the 4 errors? Let's review. First error, no effort months listed. Remember, on a biosketch, you would not include person months. On other support, it is required, so you would list the effort in the calendar month. Second error, note the end date on this grant. This grant should not be included in active. It should be removed, or sorry, it should be moved down to inactive if this is for an RPPR, or if this is for a just-in-time competing other support, then we would remove it altogether. Pending. This should not be pending, not recently, should be pending, sorry, not recently committed, I can't talk, completed research. And the overlap statement was missing. Like we mentioned in our previous slides, always include overlap even if there is none. All right, and that is it on other support.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, much appreciated.
NSF current and pending support. The National Science Foundation requires that all of the key personnel, all of the senior personnel, submit a list of the funding that they have available to them. That's good for ongoing research projects and for proposals that are out there that have not yet been funded. NSF is looking to identify and restrict any potential overlaps or duplication. It's a great way to check that the science that they're funding is new and unique and novel, and to ensure that the funding dollars are stretched as far as possible. New, the release date was April 1st. NSF has published policy updates for the current and pending support formats. So between now and June 1st, we're still going to utilize the old forms, but June 1st going forward, there will be 2 potential current and pending support formats supported by the National Science Foundation. That will be ScieENcv or an NSF fillable PDF. This will be very similar to their rollout of the biographical sketch that we've discussed. Unfortunately, going forward from June 1st, PDFs that have been created outside of those 2 options will likely be rejected, and they will be outside of NSF policy, so we are to avoid those going forward. From June 1st going forward, between April and June 1st, those are still okay. Here's a sample of the new fillable PDF that's coming out June 1st. We're not going to get into the details today. This is just a quick heads up that this is coming. When you have a chance, you can check it out. And there will potentially be training on this form prior to June 1st. But here is a brief sample of it for today, just to take a quick peek. Again, NSF released this information April 1st. This form will be required one of two, ScieENcv and this downloadable PDF. And this will be for submission via Fastlane, research.gov, or also grants.gov. Current and pending support, what does it include? Well, it's trying really to capture any and all resources available to the faculty member. Now, I think historically we looked at this from more of a purely fiscal perspective. How much money have they received and from who? I guess philosophically this does change, but technically the NSF has been asking for this recently. And recently they've been enforcing it to where beyond just the typical funding that faculty members have been reporting, they're asking for clear representation of other kinds of contributions to the science, including in kind. And what this really is sort of honing in on is foreign collaborations. And we're going to talk about that in a few slides. But for now, let's just talk about the details of what an in-kind contribution is. This gets a little tricky. In-kind contributions are typically non-monetary support received by faculty. And we have a list here that we're referencing: space, office and lab space, equipment, supplies, and also it includes employees and students. So just a little, some questions come up here, a little bit of confusion maybe even. Well, how do we report that, right? How would you report employees or students? Well, okay, so in-kind contributions that are not intended on this proposal and they don't have any associated time commitment, we don't have to report those, okay? So that maybe clears up some of the problems, right? If it's lab space, you know, that's not a time commitment. Especially if it's not being used for this proposal, then we don't have to report it. But if there is a time commitment, right? If it's going to take the use of a specific microscope or recharge facility, then that must be included in the facilities, equipment, and resources section. Okay, so in this last section here, in-kind contributions are intended for the use of the project proposal being proposed, and they have no associated time commitment, must be included in the facilities, equipment, and other resources section. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so exactly what types of resources are we discussing? Well, let's start with the easy one here on the right, not gifts, right? So UCSD has a definition of what a gift is, and it's basically an irrevocable transfer of funds where there's no deliverables required. The gifts can be designated, but they could be, I guess, restricted for a specific purpose is what I would like to say about that, or they can be unrestricted. But there is not going to be something required in exchange or in return for those gift funds, and they can't take the gift funds back. So those don't have to be reported. But what does have to be reported? Well, any item or service must typically be reported. In-kind contributions now must typically be reported. And then in this middle section here, sources of support. Sources of support include, okay, so we're used to the first several bullet points. Most of us, it's very common to see federal, state, local, foreign, private, and nonprofit funding listed. The industrial or other commercial organizations, we really do need to list those. But the two here, bold and underlined at the bottom, I think might be slight philosophical change for folks, to where we're going to want to list sources of consulting support for the faculty member. And we are also going to list internal funds that are allocated towards specific projects. So if the faculty member has a portfolio of funding, some discretionary funds, if those funds are allocated toward a very specific project, then we would want to list those. If they're not, and that includes startup, right? Startup does not list a specific project, then we wouldn't need to list that. So here is an image of you know, the traditional current and pending support for NSF. This is the one applicable now in April through May 31st. So starting June 1st, this will look different. But between now and then, this is still appropriate. So just to quickly go over some of the sections here, we're going to list the investigator name, the type of support, whether it's current or pending. And when we're putting together our current and pending support, group those together. So we typically list multiple currently funded awards in order, and then after that we would list the pending. We're going to list other agencies if the proposal has been submitted to other agencies. We don't see this all the time. Concurrent submissions need to be reported, and the NSF doesn't look down on it. There's not going to be a negative repercussion for listing it there. It's just noted. That way we have given them the disclosure that that is a potential. And then what happens is down the road, we'll be able to accept one or the other of that funding if it's the exact same science. Okay, if we go down the list a little bit here, we see that we list the project proposal title and the source of support. So here for location of project, we typed out the UC San Diego. I'm down at SIO, so we would, in addition, write Scripps Institution of Oceanography. To continue, just a few remaining sections here on the current and pending support page. So we're going to list the total award amount. This is different than NIH, which only requests the direct costs. This NSF request is for the total direct and indirect costs. Also, the total award period covered, it's the entire project period. So here we have referenced a 3-year project period beginning October of 20 and ending in September of 23. Again, that's a little different than NIH, for example, that typically we're listing just a single project period at a time. This is the entire period covered. And then the person months committed to the project will be listed here. That's going to be a little different in the new form, June 1st going forward. They're going to ask for that for each year, but for now we're still just listing it here in general terms. Calendar is 1.2. That's the person months per year, regardless of actual fluctuations. So here's a couple FAQs. If we were live, we could have a little more fun and do this as a pop quiz, but since it's being recorded, just kind of run through it for you. Can we create our own Word doc and convert it to a PDF as of June 2020 for submission into those systems? No, that wouldn't be compliance. If the current and pending support is prepared in ScieENcv, does that information automatically link to the NSF systems? Again, no. Once we create that in the system, we're going to have a chance to sort of download and save that document for use as a document we will upload in the appropriate system that we're using for submission. Will non-compliant current and pending support receive an error message in both Fastlane and research.gov? Yes. Documents will be tagged. Okay, so that's fair. We'll get a little bit of a heads up and a warning, which is going to be very helpful. Okay, this should be a pretty easy one. Do we report gifts in current and pending support? So if it meets the definition here at UCSD, then it would not be reported. Do I have to include in-kind contributions in both the current and pending support and facilities, equipment, and other resources sections of the proposal? Okay, this is a little bit tricky and there's some nuance here, but no. Question, do I report startup packages or academic year salary in current and pending support? So I referenced that. The startup packages are not required to be reported. Here is a great example of a caveat that we really need to emphasize and take into consideration. Startup packages from other than the proposing organization, those must be reported. And again, the idea here is we're really trying to capture these instances of foreign collaborations. So if there's a startup package for your faculty member anywhere else besides the current organization, right now we're all UCSD, anywhere else outside of that, yes, we need to report that. Okay, well, thank you for your attention on the NSF Other Support. Next up, we have the NSF Research Protection. NSF Research Protection has become a hot topic of late, although the rules basically have been on the books for quite some time. So since about 1978, faculty have been required to disclose all sources of support, both foreign and domestic. As it turns out, I think we have been pretty lax about this over the years, right? Or conversely, it has become more of an opportunity and a potential for faculty members to receive funding, foreign funding, especially these days, is the hot topic, and haven't been reporting on it. So this is something we really want to keep an eye out for, and please be sure to communicate this to your PIs. It's really important that this information is shared. There have been some folks that have made the news, unfortunately, for accepting funding from foreign organizations and not properly disclosing it. So it's going to be in our best interest to really sort of push on this for a while. International collaboration is essential. It is something that's core to the sort of the understanding that universities have is for the most part we're basic medical, basic research. So we're exchanging our resources and our time and our efforts here in order to publish for free use. The idea is we take in federal dollars, we perform a research activity, and then we share the results freely. We disseminate that as part of the structure of the university. And we want to continue to do that. We really want to be open and collaborative. The thing is lately there have been some situations that have arisen where that same transparency hasn't been equal across the board. And so in the United States, the science has been put at risk. Other governments have incentivized folks from their research organizations to go out and to try to gather as much information as they can. And that's where we need to be really clear on what we disseminate to folks and how we disseminate that information. So one of the things we're really trying to do here is with this NSF research protection is to protect some of those researchers and the work that they're doing, protect the ability of reviewers to have privacy, and to have the faculty submitting for review know that their items are safe and secure and they're being reviewed with all fairness. So this is a hot topic, and stay tuned for more. There'll be additional workshops, I'm sure, as this continues to evolve. But the main takeaway here is to please, work with your faculty members and get them to disclose all sources of foreign contributions, whether it's cash, funding, dollar bills, or if it's in-kind contributions. Okay, well, I hope that's helpful, and I appreciate your time. Thank you again. Bye.
Sorry. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Erica Wilson, my boss. She is going to be talking to you about foreign components today. So Erica, welcome.
Thank you, Jill. I really appreciate you doing all this training and happy to be here. Okay, today we're going to go over foreign components and how it relates to other support and biosketches and conflict of interest. So addressing the foreign affiliation and where does this actually come from and what is it, the definition of a foreign component. So research, this all came out of NIH and an investigation there. So the rules have not really changed. It's that we need to start disclosing everything. And so the big question is, does this project involve activity outside of the United States or a partnership with an international collaborator? And one of the big questions for us, as most of the work is not being done outside of the United States, but you're working with someone who is outside, and can it lead to a publication? And that is the big aspect of what we need to start disclosing, is the participation in publications. So let's get started. So NIH recognizes the importance of international collaborations, and they actually encourage it. They want it to continue to happen for scientific advances. They just want us to be open and disclose what we are doing. So NIH seeks to improve the reporting of all resources in this area, and that we have properly reported international collaborations on research. Foreign component definition. NIH requires recipients to determine whether activities it supports includes a foreign component. The existence of any significant scientific element or segment of a project outside of the United States. Performance of work by a researcher or recipient in a foreign location, whether or not the NIH grant funds are expended or not. So whether or not you're paying them as a subaward or not, this, if you're collaborating with them, if you're exchanging data, if you're working on any type, you're exchanging materials, any of those things you need to be disclosing. And then in the end, will this work into a publication and shared authorship? A lot of this goes around with postdocs that started in the lab and you collaborated with, and then they go back to their home country, but eventually when the paper's published, they are a foreign component and it has to be disclosed. In a foreign location, employed or paid by a foreign organization, whether or not NIH grant funds are also expended. So that is the other side of this, is where they're located and if they are being paid by a foreign location. So sometimes we have paid direct postdocs or visiting scholars, those, and you're collaborating with them. If you do, you need to disclose those in your proposals, as well as if you publish on your other support and Biosketch. Okay, determining a foreign component. If a recipient determines that a portion of the project will be conducted outside the United States, the recipient will then need to determine if the activities are considered significant. If both criteria are met, then there is a foreign component. Pretty simple. Foreign components and other support. If an activity does not meet the definition of a foreign component, because all research is being conducted within the US, but there is a non-US resource that supports the research of an investigator and/or researcher, it must be reported on the other support. This includes lab service agreements, federal, I'll get into all of that. So includes all financial resources, federal, non-federal, commercial, and institutional, if these have a foreign component in them, foreign money or collaboration. Available in direct support of an individual's research endeavors, including but not limited to research grants, cooperative agreements, contracts, institutional awards, and like I said, service agreements. If they are from a foreign entity, then they have to be disclosed as well as other support. Examples of a foreign component. A PD, PI of an NIH funded grant has a collaborator outside the US who performs experiments in support of the PI's NIH funded project. This would constitute a foreign component, regardless of whether the foreign collaborator receives funding from the PI's grant. Recently, I talked with one of our PIs who came to me to discuss foreign component. He has many visiting scholars into his lab, and he also does what he referred to as crowdsourcing for data analysis. So in that crowdsourcing, because they're foreign collaborators, and he lists them on publications, every one of those has to be disclosed on his other support and his Biosketch because of the publication. So that was a huge change for him, and it also had to be reported on his RPPR. And he had like over 60 publications that he had to go back and reference. So it's very important that we follow this. Additional funding from a foreign source for the NIH supported research of a PI at a US institution would not constitute a foreign component, but would necessitate reporting as other support. Foreign appointments on the Biosketch, you must list all of your foreign appointments. If you have a appointment at a foreign institution, whether it's salaried or not, needs to be listed here in your positions. If you're a member of any talents programs, they need to be listed here, or any type of affiliated appointment with any other institution needs to be here, and especially the foreign institutions. Again, list foreign affiliation appointments, list all foreign positions relevant to an application, but I would suggest you just list them all, whether it's relevant to this application or any application. They need to be on your Biosketch. Titled academics, professional or institutional appointments, whether or not remuneration is received and or whether full-time, part-time, or voluntary, including adjunct visiting or honorary. So any type of appointment needs to be listed there. Listing foreign components on NIH other support would look similar to this. Report all the resources and other support for all individuals designated in an application, senior key personnel, including the program director, principal investigator, and for other individuals who contribute to the scientific development or execution of a project in a substantive, measurable way, whether or not they request salary or compensation. They all need to be listed here. Information must be provided about all current support for ongoing projects, irrespective of whether such support is provided through the applicant organization, through another domestic or foreign organization, or is provided directly to an individual that supports the senior key personnel's research efforts. Foreign support on other support pages would look like this. Report all current projects and activities, even if the support received is only in kind, like office laboratory space, equipment, supplies, employees, still need to be listed here. All research resources, including but not limited to foreign financial support, research or lab personnel, lab space, scientific materials, selection of a foreign talent or similar type program, other foreign or domestic support must be reported. Conflict of interest and foreign and financial interests are also part of disclosure that has to happen in regards to foreign component. So financial conflict of interest regulation specifies the minimum requirements for investigators to disclose to their institution their significant financial interests. So this is on your FCOI. Disclosure includes financial interest received from a foreign entity. This requirement is distinct and in addition to the reporting of other support and foreign components to the NIH. UCSD and FCOI always adhere to the standards that are more stringent than those in the regulation, like those that are required disclosure of all financial interests. The other, I'm going to mention also besides foreign, the COI, there's also at UCSD the conflict of commitment. That also has to be listed, and if there's any foreign components in your conflict of commitment for the faculty, that's a whole nother set of forms that's done by the department. So there's an additional area where you have to track it as well. So here's some frequently asked questions for foreign components. Did the definition of a foreign component change? No, it was released in July, re-released in July 2019, and it was just a reminder. This policy has been the policy for well over 15 years. We just, NIH thought everybody was disclosing all when they've said all, but in fact the application instructions said disclose those that are relevant for this project. So their instructions for the application didn't match their policy. That's why they're bringing it back together, and it means all. So all disclosures have to happen. The policy has not changed. It's just being reiterated and enforced. The other question, what should I do if I'm not sure if something needs to be included as other support? In interest of full transparency, recipients should err on the side of disclosure. If you know something or have a question, you should always disclose. And the other thing is NIH is instructing as soon as we know, we need to disclose if it's in ongoing research as well. We need to let them know, plus update the other support in Biosketches and RPPRs. Researchers should consult with their sponsor projects officer for guidance to ensure compliance with institutional and NIH policies. NIH requires complete and accurate reporting of all sources of research support, financial interests and affiliations, both foreign and domestic. Next question. I am the PI on an NIH grant to a domestic university. I have a visiting postdoctoral fellow in my lab who works on my NIH grant and does all of his or her work in the United States. The fellow's salary is paid by a foreign government. Is this a foreign component? In general, no. The first step is determining whether research constitutes a foreign component is to evaluate whether a portion of the research is being conducted outside the United States. In this case, all of the work is being conducted in the United States, so there is no foreign component. And I would just say, going back to that, there's no foreign component as the work is being done here, but if that postdoc leaves and goes back to their home country and then produces the publication, then that would be something we would put in your RPPR proposal. There's a statement and a blanket template that we have on the HISPA website that would help guide you in drafting that language that would go into that report, so that we would cover it in case it led to a publication. So that's all that I have for today. Thank you.
So just to wrap up what we've talked about today, because we've talked about a lot of different stuff here. We've talked about NIH Biosketches, NSF Biosketches, other support, ORCID, ScieENcv, and foreign components. Big chunk of stuff to learn today. So let's just wrap it up and talk about what the big key differences are with research support, other support, and current and pending. So remember, research support is on your Biosketch, and that's going to highlight the accomplishments of your PI or your other key personnel. So slightly different. Other support, which can be confusing because it's when NSF calls it current and pending support, but NIH calls it other support. So remember, other support for NIH is requested at just in time. So if you put in an application, it has a good score, and NIH is looking, it might fund it, they're going to ask you for those just-in-time documents, and that's when they're going to ask you about other support. Or at the RPPR progress report time, you might have to also include an other support document there. So remember, the key objective for other support is NIH always wants to look for overlap, whether it's scientific, budgetary, or effort, but they're always looking. That's the kind of the end game for them. Remember, the current support is the correct jargon for NSF, and NSF really wants to see all the projects that require time commitment on their grants, and it even includes in-kind contributions. So the two agencies are slightly different in what the requirements are. So this is just something that is on the website, and I find it very helpful because you can see what's required based on, this is the NIH Biosketch research support, this is the format. Other support as far as a just-in-time, it would be here, and then RPPR, and then we also put in the data tables because that is also something that comes up quite a bit a lot of requests on campus for research support for Table 4. So this is on the website. NSF is not on this particular spreadsheet because they just call things differently, but we do have an NSF checklist on the website. And just to highlight here, these were the major changes from the other support when they released this last July. They want the total cost for both annual and the entire project period. So these things have changed a little bit. So it's good to update your records if you have an old copy of this from last year. Again, the Biosketch checklists are on the website. We have resources on the website, links to the NIH official policy pages. Again, other support. Remember, they were all just updated in March 2020. So they have those new forms out. Again, all this is on the website. If you need to find that PDF fillable form for NSF current and pending or Biosketch, everything's on our linkable on the website. And this is the other policy for that. So again, if you go into Blink and let's go back and you type into Blink RSC and go to training resources, you'll find this page. And all the presentation videos will be there, the PowerPoint, the outline, links and videos to pretty much everything that we've talked about today. And then there's also going to be a place, a Google form where you can submit a question. And when you submit your question, just give us about 12 to 24 hours to get to the subject matter expert on campus, and then they will get back to you with an answer. We do have an FAQ page, so hopefully that will answer a lot of your questions as well. And then if you decide to give us feedback today, we would appreciate it. Again, that's the there's a link to it right on the website. Again, thanks for watching, and we hope to do this live again next year.